5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
One of the most basic and fundamental ideas, for lack of a better word, when it comes to Christianity, frankly, when it comes to religion in general, is God. What is God? Who is God? It's one of the basic fundamental ideas of our faith, and yet I and many others today would contend that it is also one of the most misunderstood ideas when it comes at least to Christianity. What do I mean by that? What I mean is most of us actually don't have as clear of a conception of who and what God is as we actually think. So what is God in actuality? That's what we're going to be talking about today on Ignition. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Bergwald, and we want to set your faith ablaze so that you might live the adventure that comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Before we get into today's topic, we want you to know that we love listener feedback, so if you've got questions about today's episode, or if you have ideas for future episodes, please contact us. The easiest way to do so is by email, and the address is ignition@sfcatholic.org. Again, ignition@sfcatholic.org. I'm joined once again, two weeks in a row by my one-time regular guest co-host, Renae Kranz. Hey, Renae.
Hello.
Renae, we talked joke last. Well, it was true. You took, as you described it, a bit of a hiatus. Yeah. But you were back last week.
We were on a break.
A little break. We took a break, but now we're back. The band's back together again. Ready
With
to
no
go.
good songs.
You were unusually quiet last week, so you just attributed that.
You
to
were just really
acclamation.
doing on a roll. You were.
I was on a roll.
I'll try not to be as quiet, but I hate to interrupt you when you're on a roll.
Since when?
Okay, that might be true.
I mean, why are you so different in Ignition than the way you are the rest of our working relationship?
Oh, you wish I was less different. I probably, or yeah. I wish I was actually more different.
More like Ignition in real life, maybe?
Maybe, yes.
Maybe.
Am I nicer?
I don't know.
I can be more
I like the feisty Kranz.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah.
So, you didn't know what we're going to be talking about today.
No.
What'd you think about my opener?
I'm intrigued.
So,
because now I'm wondering if what I think God is wrong.
Heretic. Get the pitchforks. I oftentimes, in Ignition, I don't know how many times I've wanted to use as the title, and sometimes I have. I've wanted to use as the title for an episode of Ignition, one of the most well-known quotes from one of my favorite movies ever, The Princess Bride. Renae, have you seen The Princess Bride?
I have not, but you share that with Aaron Rodgers. How does that make you feel?
It's fine. I mean, as long as we're not sharing the psychedelics, I'm okay.
Right. Exactly.
I'll share the movie favorite movies.
You might have to be on I can't even say the word.
Psychedelics?
Yes, to watch that movie.
No, you do not. You've never seen it?
I've seen parts of it. I've never seen it from beginning to end.
So there's this character, Inigo Montoya, and his probably the line he says above all is, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You can my father prepare to die." It's the line he's going to, and then, spoiler alert, does say to the man who killed his father when he finally finds him. But probably the second most quoted line, maybe it's even actually quoted more, even though he only says it once. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
That is definitely more quoted,
right.
yes.
You've never seen the movie, but you know the line.
I do.
You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Now, Casey, have you seen The Princess Bride? What?
It's not. Have you seen any bits or pieces?
We should stop this episode right now and go
Cut.
watch. No.
Okay, so have you seen any bits or pieces of it, Casey? No bits or pieces. Okay, well.
How is the communications office supposed to relate with regular people if you've never seen The Princess Bride? Anyway, this is a whole nother tangent we don't have time for.
Right.
I'm trying to talk about God, and we're stuck
serious.
on Princess Bride. One character keeps using the word inconceivable. And at a certain point, Inigo says to him, "You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means." We use the word God all the time.
Yes, we do.
But it is my proposal that it does not mean exactly what we think it means.
Okay.
That the real God, when we come to understand the nature of the true God, which we will ultimately, every one of us, everybody listening or watching to this episode right now, you and I and Casey, one day will come to know, not completely, but we'll have like the veil will fall away, the scales will formalize, and we'll quote unquote see God as He truly is, and we'll realize, oh, I was kind of wrong, and not enough. So I want to be clear here.
Will we be okay with that?
Well, it depends how
on
wrong
which way
we
you're
were.
going.
But let's take us as just as Catholics, Christians in general, people of biblical faith. I think,
Okay.
like what we know of God from Scripture, we've got a pretty good idea of God. But there's another level, another layer, or whatever. There's think of like. Off the coast of an ocean, you've got the what is it, the continental. Like it's shallow for a while and then it goes deep. What's that called?
The shelf?
The shelf. Thank you. Mm-hmm. The shelf, and then it goes like miles deep. There's something similar that can happen during our earthly life through prayer and through our study of theology and what the church teaches. Where we're going to start to descend. You can start to descend, but for all of us, at the end of our lives. Earthly lives, and then at the end of time, that's going to go even further when we see God as He actually is. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that, again, if you're a church going person, or if you've ever been a church going person, you probably have a decent idea of God as He actually is. But Bishop Barron talks about this a lot, and in fact, we're going to be, hopefully, time permitting, quoting from Bishop Barron a little bit. Bishop Robert Barron, who's now kind of next door to us here, our diocesan neighbor in the Diocese of Winona, Rochester. Bishop there now, priest originally from the Archdiocese of Chicago. Bishop Barron talks a lot about how you need to have an adult faith. And I've said this for a long time, too. My longtime role with the diocese, director of adult discipleship and evangelization, the faith that I received when I was in first or second grade or 10th grade or 11th grade is not enough to serve the intellectual needs, frankly, of a 40-year-old.
Right.
What works for a 10-year-old doesn't work for a 50-year-old.
Right.
So we do use simple concepts when we're children because our minds are immature. But as we become adults, we need to put our big boy pants on and come to understand in a deeper way what our church teaches, generally speaking, but certainly when it comes to God.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't even really think about that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And listen.
You just go along, going to church every Sunday. And
also, as somebody who has a doctorate in theology, there are ways where, what we're going to talk about today, I get to every couple of years with a particular group, I get to do an in-depth teaching on relatively speaking, an in-depth teaching on who and what God is. Relatively, we're talking about 16 hours. But Renae, I'm telling you, we could spend a lifetime of study on the nature of God, and we'd start to descend into the depths. And it's just so literally awesome when you become aware of the nature of God. Okay. All right. So I want to begin by just looking briefly at Scripture. So Exodus chapter 3, we read, second book of the Bible, third chapter, Exodus chapter 3, we read about Moses and an encounter with the burning bush. So I don't want to take time to read it, but what's the synopsis? What's the summary version of the story insofar as you recall it?
Oh, well, Moses sees a burning bush. He knows it's God somehow. God's speaking to him.
What's weird about the bush? Do you remember?
It was not being consumed by the fire. So, of course, that was a little freaky for Moses. I don't remember. That was when he asked Moses to go free his people.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep. Yep. So if you read all of chapter 3,
I was trying to picture the movie in my head.
The Ten Commandments,
The Ten Commandments.
right? By the way, Charlton Heston was an awful pick to play Moses. Do you know why?
He was probably an atheist or something.
No.
Okay.
He's a fervent believer. No, Charlton Heston has an incredible voice.
Right?
Moses stuttered.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Moses had a speech impediment.
Well, he was an actor. He could have stuttered in the movie.
No. But this is why. So who speaks on Moses' behalf before Pharaoh? All the time.
Oh, does Aaron?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
I didn't realize. I guess
Because
they do kind of show
Moses
that in the movie
stuttered.
a couple times even, actually. Yeah.
So
How do you know he stuttered? Does it say
because
that
it
in there?
says so
Does it
in the
really?
Bible. Wow.
See, all I get it is from the movie.
So Moses, not Charlton Heston. Just real briefly from chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And then Moses, here I am. Don't come near, put off your shoes, it's holy ground. I am the God of your fathers. I've heard my people's cry, and I want to send you to them to set them free. Later on, though, skipping ahead, verse 13. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the sons of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? So, all right, Lord, if you want me to do this, oh boy, if you really want me to do this, when I go back and I say, the God of our fathers has sent me to you, and they ask, what is his name? What do I tell them? Do you remember, Renae? Do you remember God's answer?
Yeah. I am who am.
So, and God said to Moses, verse 14, I am who I am.
Who I am.
And he said, and that you're...
It depends on the translation.
Depends on the translation.
Yeah.
And he said, say this to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Okay. You're Moses. You're talking to a bush that's not burning. It's God.
I'm already wondering about myself at this point.
Lord, what is your name? I am who I am. Let's take it out of the context of Scripture, and it's God.
Mm-hmm.
You meet somebody. Hey, I'm Renae Kranz. What's your name? I am who I am. What's your...
You're like, why are you being such a jerk right now?
Why is that such a jerky response?
It sounds just like, I don't need to tell you who I am.
Yep.
Yeah.
What else? Yes. Or I should say, anything else?
No, I just take it as just a jerky.
It's evasive.
Oh, yes, it is evasive.
It's like, I'm not going to tell you. It feels that way, at least.
Yeah.
I am who I am. But what? Okay. What'd your mom call you? I am. Oh, come on. It's an evasive response, in part. So there's two
on purpose.
There's two answers. So two understandings of what's going on here in God revealing His name to Moses. I'm starting with the first one. It's an evasive, it's a mysterious response because we, with our powerful and yet finite created intellects, cannot comprehend the length and the breadth and the depth of God. And for the Semitic culture, for biblical culture and Semitic culture all around it, think of Mediterranean culture, to say somebody's name entailed was basically saying, oh, I know this person.
Ah, okay.
For me to be able to say, you are Renae Kranz, implies some degree of like really knowing who and what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And Moses did not know in a deep way who and what God is.
Mm-hmm.
So in Scripture, when we read things like, and Adam knew Eve,
Oh, right.
what's that mean?
Usually that he
There
they
was
were husband and wife.
there's intimacy
There, thank you.
between.
Like, how do I say this?
There's intimacy between the two. They knew each other as
Yeah.
husband and wife. Marital sexual love,
Right.
which is life-giving. To know scripturally, to be able to say somebody's name implies some degree of familiarity and even intimacy.
Okay.
So if I know you enough to say your name, so you didn't just like, we put print cards with our names on them. But for Semitic cultures, at least ancient Semitic cultures, to know somebody's name implied some degree of familiarity and intimacy, as I've said a few times. All right. So God, by giving what seems to be an evasive, mysterious answer, is just you don't know me as much as you think you do.
Okay.
But secondly, for God to say, in response to Moses' question, who are you? For God to say, I am, is also literally the truth.
Right.
And this is where, so you said right. What do you mean by that?
Because he is just being. He is existence. So
you are a well-formed Catholic who can say that.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
See, that's the thing. I can say it because I've heard it and I can regurgitate that. But do I really know what that means? Yeah.
And if we if we can find somebody who can start to unpack what that means,
Is the hair standing up on your arm?
goosebumps for me right now, just thinking about what we're talking about. So Bishop Barron, I am who I am. God is being, as you said, he's being, he's existence. God is. He is, and the way that, so Thomas Aquinas has this phrase in Latin that Bishop Barron translates into English, the sheer act of to be itself. The sheer act, the pure, unadulterated, unmitigated, nothing else, the sheer act of to be itself. God is isness. I'm a human being. I have the being of what it means to be. My being is human being. God's being is existence. It is pure being, unfiltered by anything. My being as finite is sort of filtered through human nature. So it's limited. It's constrained in human being. God's being is unfiltered, unencumbered, unrestrained. The sheer act of to be itself. He is isness. He's beingness. That's what he is. Okay. All right. Great. All right, I can say that. Then I know what God is. No.
No, totally
So,
not.
Bishop Barron, 2004, published a collection of essays. This is before he got big. The collection of essays is Bridging the Great Divide. So this is like deeper theology than if you just watch one of his movie reviews on YouTube from not too much long after that. Like he's speaking at a certain level in this book as a theologian. Okay. So there's one essay in particular. It's the 7th chapter in the book. Thomas Aquinas' Christological reading of God and the creature.
That's yeah, exactly.
I just want to read a little because
Completely. If you aren't watching, just completely over Bergwald's
the over the head
Just
gesture,
completely,
right?
yes.
But I just want to read a little bit from Bishop Barron because what Bishop Barron does, he's not doing anything new. He is just unpacking not just St. Thomas Aquinas, but what the general Christian tradition has always said about the divine nature, about what it means to say God is the sheer act to be itself. What does that actually mean? And Bishop starts by using a word. So he's Father Barron then, but he's Bishop now, so I'll call him Bishop. A word that he often uses that I love. When we talk about our faith. He has this line in one of his particular works, De Potentia Dei. St. Thomas Aquinas gives his richest and most compelling account of the strangeness of both God and creature as seen in the light of the incarnation. God is strange. I was going to say weird, but I'm not describing his personality.
Right.
Like to understand, to start to at a human adult, at an adult level, to understand what God is. God's strange, and in fact, so are we.
Yes.
But God's even stranger. Like this is where we talked about, like the Mass, familiarity breeds contempt. Last week was this one part of a multi-part, crazy long series we're doing, walking through the Mass. As I said in the open, the idea of God is like the most basic idea when it comes to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a God, we worship him, right? But what God is actually mind-blowingly weird. Like weird in the sense of abnormal, what we're not used to,
Right.
Different from what we normally understand. So this is Bishop Barron unpacking St. Thomas Aquinas. So I'm unpacking Barron, who's unpacking Aquinas, who's summarizing the general Christian tradition.
Okay.
What emerges in the course of this discussion of St. Thomas Aquinas in his work De Potentia Dei, what emerges in the course of this discussion is the surprising truth that God is in no sense either comparable to or contrastable from any of the things in the world. In the response, Aquinas offers, so right now, Renae, you should have stopped me and say, wait, what did you just say?
Sorry.
You fairly, to be fair, you didn't.
I'm just comfortably listening.
I know you are. But this is where I know. I'm
Well, in
I
this,
read
okay.
I read it deliberately that way, hoping you would not.
Okay.
And you didn't. So thank you for playing along.
You're welcome.
What emerges in the course of Thomas's discussion is the surprising truth that God is in no sense either comparable. He is not comparable to or contrastable from any of the things in the world. So so right before this, Barron is talking about how remember Aristotle's the one who came up with, in high school biology we learned about kingdom, phylum, family, genera, species, genus, species, right? So Aristotle categorized as best as he could everything that lives, and he created that 7-level thing, right? That we learned in high school biology that clearly I can't remember hardly any of.
Remembering more than I do.
So it's one of the marks of the Aristotelian science to categorize objects according to genus and species, naming things through comparison and contrast with others. So a dog is different than a cat because, well, you can compare and contrast. They're similar. They're both animals. They're both mammals, but they're different. They belong to different genera, different genuses and species, blah, blah, blah. What emerges in the course of Aquinas' discussion in De Potentia Dei is the surprising truth that God is in no sense either comparable to, comparable to, or contrastable from any of the things in the world. And right there, Renae, like this is one of the... What Barron is saying, what Christian theologians have said forever is, you can't compare God to anything else in the world. Okay, I can't do that because he's different. No, you can't do that either. Well, what do you mean? So compared to the similarities,
right?
You can't compare God to anything else in the world. God does not exist the same way that I exist, that you exist, that this coaster exists. His beingness is differently than my be. I be. God bees. It's bad English to make the point. I know I'm speaking to a journalist and an editor. You got to let it go.
Yeah.
I be, God bees, but we don't be the same way.
Right.
We be differently. Oh, okay. I'm with. So he's really different. Yeah. Or he's not the same. Correct. So he's really different. Nope. Can't do that. What? Well, he's different than, yeah, but you're contrasting God with what's in the world. And what St. Thomas shows us in a really dense work that we're not diving into, and I'm just giving you the slightly less dense, barren version unpacked. You can't compare God or contrast God with anything in the world, anything that you and I sense, we see, touch, hear, smell, or taste. I can't compare or contrast God with any of that. So let me go on. As the most intense reality, God must transcend the limitations of any division of being. So now he quotes St. Thomas. Thus it is also evident that God is not a species, nor an individual, nor is there any difference in him, nor can he be defined, since every definition is in terms of genus and species. So I breezed over something here that Barron, when I read this, Barron made me stop and go back to. It is here that we see perhaps most clearly the dismantling of the theology of the supreme being that takes place throughout Thomas's writings. God, in fact, for Christian theology, God is not the supreme being, because God is not a being. He is being. So when Aquinas, Bishop Barron says, laconically tosses off, just offhandedly tosses off the observation that God is not an individual, which is what Thomas said. He said, God is not an individual. Okay, right there, Renae, like, we just plummet. We didn't realize it. We're in the submarine that just dropped 5 feet in 2 seconds into the bottom of the ocean. Mm-hmm. God's not an individual. Mm-hmm. What the heck does that mean?
Right.
Because everything we know this is an individual book. This is an individual piece of paper. You're an individual human being. He's a different individual human being. This is an individual. God is not an individual.
Yeah.
He's not the supreme being because he's not a being. He is pure, unadulterated being. Barron goes on. So when Thomas says, he announces the radicality of the Christian conception of the sacred. God is not a supreme reality in, above, or alongside of the world. As that reality which simply is, God is prior to any of the splits that characterize less dramatic instances of being. Renae, there's going to be a part 2 to this episode.
Well, I think there has to be.
We have to unpack. So this is mind-blowing. Folks, stay tuned for our next episode because we're going to go deep into what this means. Renae, stick around, okay?
Okay.
Folks, that we're at this episode. Watch for part 2. But if you have questions about part 1, ignition@sfcatholic.org. And until next time, may God bless you.